Welcome to Bountiful Void. Today we'll be talking about D&D and some tips before you start the Lost Mines of Phandelver. This is 10 tips that I developed after being a new DM and running a group of new players through the Lost Mines, and some things that would have really helped out a lot if I would have known at the beginning. Jumping into those 10 tips, at number 1, start easy. Don't think you have to know everything that's going on before you jump in, and don't think you even have to read the entire pamphlet of all 64 pages and the entire rule book and be able to recall it at a moment's notice before you get going. Make sure the Dungeon Master yourself has a basic idea of what is happening within the story, and you'll be able to help the characters and the new players through understanding their character sheets and how combat takes place. The story is great in easing the characters into combat with the Gauntlet Ambush and also a room to room dungeon like crawl with the Krogma hideout following Jess afterwards. So the characters themselves, your players, really need to just have read their character sheets. If you have pre-decided their characters for them or had them pick between the different character options with the pre-generated characters that comes with the Lost Mine set, that's the best way for them to get started and see if they get a good feel for the game overall. Also, don't think you have to read the entire contents. Understanding the first few encounters to flush out a first game session, be it 1 or 2 hours long, would be the best. The characters will definitely drive the narrative and story, and you'll see where they want to progress once they get into Phandalin itself. So don't think you need to overplan every particular step and what's going to happen on each way. The collaborative nature of the storytelling will ensure things evolve together. And don't think you have to run a 4 to 5 hour session on your first go. You'll be able to control the expectations of the players and target for that 2 hour, 1 hour maybe session, depending upon what the pace of play is. And don't overstress yourself by making sure that you know what particular encounters you're going to need to execute in the last dungeon, for example. Just make sure you're prepared enough to handle what they might throw at you in the first session, and then collaboratively build that story as you progress. Don't over prep. Just focus on those key things. Get right into the adventure itself and see how that group dynamic starts to build. Keep it easy and keep it simple to start. The second tip, give your characters a map. Having that story start out with Gundren and Saladar heading from Neverwinter to Phandalin, and then the adventurers following right behind him, is a great setup for them to understand the relationship of these major cities between each other on the Swords Coast, and this can serve as a great foundation to start dropping in the other places as they learn about the different locations that they'll be adventuring within this region. Don't give them one that has all of the places mapped out on the start, because as they hear them, they'll be interested to look back and see where they are on that map, and it's easily able to just add additional content, additional locations as you progress. Start them out with a map so they know where they are in relationship to the major locations you're talking about and the items within their backstory, such as Thunder Tree, but keep things progressing and build on it overall. It's very easy to find a wide selection of Sword Coast maps. Just a quick Google search, you can find and pull from a wide assortment of different uh, source material, find one to your liking, and make sure you highlight the locations that are pertinent for your party and for you to build on. Don't wait until they discover a map, get it to them early to really cement where they are in the world. Tip number 3, let your characters meet each other. This was a great introduction because we're not going to do a game 0 because the characters didn't create their own characters. The players really kind of developed their stories around their characters based on the character sheet themselves. Incorporating this into your first session where you do experience combat with the Goblin ambush encounter is a great way to do it. That opportunity for them to ride together on the back of a wagon is outstanding, for them to talk with each other and use that opportunity to highlight their strengths, which when I did this, I noted their skills that were above average, so they could see how they balance with the party and potentially could leverage those different attributes to be a complete team, highlighting what weapons they have at the start, and also the major attributes that they could possibly leverage overall. I asked the characters to not just review their character sheets, but also to provide a name and a picture that best represents their character, and this is what I got back from my characters. Also, on tip number 4, as a DM, a lot of that value is participating in online communities on Facebook or Reddit, or different places where you can get inspired by art and content, a lot of richness that the D&D universe has. So find images you like and look at incorporating them into your game or using them in lieu of some of the provided art with the text itself. For example, this middle is the content provided for Salador. If you want to use this one over on the left side, or maybe replace it with other art, this was a veteran from Wizards on the right. Feel free to incorporate that to bring you as the DM into the story that if you think could help tell or explain those characters. That was tip number 4. Tip number 5, find battle maps you like. Don't take the stock battle maps if you can find something that you think could help or add to the dynamic and the tension building around certain encounters. So for the Goblin Ambush, I liked this map because it really drew strong emphasis to the elevation differences along the road, which allowed me to teach my players about advantage and taking the high ground to help you in combat, or in this case, how it can be used against the party overall. Finding battle maps is one of the funnest things to do while you're just preparing, looking for inspiration. The Reddit group D&D Battle Maps is an excellent source, and show your love to those folks who are able to put out outstanding, beautiful content and make it your own. Start taking elements and inspirations for it and pieces that you think could fit the encounter better than the stock material overall. Lastly, tip number 6, the encounter-centric approach. One thing that I struggled with starting out was trying to understand how all the different individual encounters would map together and tell an overall narrative. This type of mapping exercise, as illustrated here, shows the different encounters framed out in a manner with the interconnecting items that would progress certain parties through the encounters to reach a logical conclusion and the combat of the big bad evil guy in Wave Echo Cave. So, as the party starts out with the Goblin ambush, they find the path, they move to the Cragmore hideout, they then can gain information from the goblins on how to progress to the Cragmore castle. If that does not occur, they could go to Phandelver and find other avenues that can reach them there, including Agatha's lair, or talking with the Red Wizard at the Old Owl Well, which also knows the location of the castle. And you can see the multiple choices the characters could have as they pick up different quests from the Phandalian quest givers, leading to different locations, which would provide additional information leading to other locations. Of course, if they did find the information to get to the Cragmaw Castle from the goblins in the hideout, there's most likely not going to be a question they ask the Banshee Agatha in her lair, so that path, of course, would be taken. This type of map I found most helpful as using it as a dynamic map and adjusting it as the party goes along and they choose particular locations to explore. And you can see the possible paths that the text provides, but also you can create your own paths and your own connections to link these encounters together to form the entire campaign. Also, things to consider is road encounters can be dropped anywhere that a party is along the road, and trying to find these road encounters, not just leveraging the random road encounters table included in the document itself, but come up with ones that may foreshadow events up and coming. For example, as they gain information on how to approach the Cragmaw Castle, it would be good to throw in a road encounter that may include orcs. Orcs would foreshadow their events that would take place on the Viner Tour episode and help pull the story in together in a more cohesive whole. Also, think about your own encounters as you get inspired by participating in the community, reading other texts, or dropping in encounters from other sources. You could also try to make these connected to the other events, maybe fleshing out motivations, backstory, or interesting creatures or bad guys and monsters that you find that you would like to throw at your party. When building your own encounters, it's good to make sure your encounters are balanced. And something that I found too late that I wish I would have had in the beginning is several free encounter calculators for 5th edition. Here is one on the left, just explaining how if you use the challenge rating provided off of monster stat blocks, you can compare them with the number of characters in your party and their respective level to calculate if there is a easy, medium, hard, or deadly encounter for your particular new design. This is a really good way to make sure you're starting off balanced with the encounter and you don't put the party at a significant disadvantage coming into it if that was not your intent. Options you always can have is have monsters run away if the combat is not to your liking as a DM, or drop more monsters in by having more monsters appear, or coming out in a type of a wave like function, like you beat the first wave, now the second wave's adds, etc., etc. But only do this. Your guiding principle for adding or dropping characters back isn't necessarily the difficulty of the encounter, but are your players having fun? Are they enjoying it? Is it becoming a slog? Get a feel and a connection with those folks, and it'll help guide you on how you can adjust your encounters mid encounter carefully to ensure the players are having fun when they're put in situations to engage in combat. Next, tip number 7. If role playing is difficult for you, if town days or days in which the party are in towns or locations where they need to role play and talk to other non player characters to get quests or vital information or just to engage in the lore, uh, if this is a challenge, for you and doesn't come naturally. The ability to improvise what these characters might say is think about it in terms of a video game. Certain people you can engage with who they will tell the player characters a little bit about their lives, a little bit about their happenings in the town overall. Drop that quest or that interest to see if it sparked your curiosity and move along. You don't have to write a lot of content or a lot of deep thought about the person. Uh, a lot of the major facts that you want is provided within the text. Have that prepared beforehand, and any details or any flavor you can add to it if you wish to come off the top of your head, you can. Or if not, don't worry, it's not going to end the day as long as they provide that correct tidbit of information and push them along to a possible quest offering, then that's the key for these interactions. Think about it like a video game. That piece of dialogue you get when you walk up to an NPC, that clear stating of what their next step would be if they want to pursue this quest, and then move on. Don't get overwhelmed if you're worried about voices and backstories and the colors of their eyes. You could make up that stuff as long as you go, but just focus on those key messages you can. Feel to prep those out if you need to beforehand, and keep the plot moving. Keep the characters moving along, and let the characters enjoy not only their own interactions but some interactions with the NPCs overall. Tip number 8, simplify the currency and handling with money. A lot of the original text for 5e pulled on all of the different coin types from copper, silver, electrum to gold to platinum, and this becomes cumbersome, and there's been a drive to reduce the number of coins uh, type overall to make it a more streamlined approach. You could easily go through the Lost Mines story and convert it to just silver and gold by doing the exchanges yourself or just dropping out the other pieces overall to allow the characters to spend less time in their Excel spreadsheets and allow them to focus on the other aspects that may be interesting to them. If you don't see this as a big disadvantage, the exchange rate and how they could provide the exchanges is pretty clear within the text. There's multiple places where you can exchange currency, one being the miners exchange. Uh, so if this is not an aspect that your characters really enjoy, just make it simple. Silver and gold, or maybe even just gold if you want to make it super simple. This isn't a key aspect as the text is written, and is a key if you're looking for ways to simplify the overall experience and record keeping. This is a great place to start. Another one is a great recommendation, as many groups do, is when they adventure, they have a group bank that can be divided up at the end of a particular episode or when they're back into town, which allows them to not just settle up every single time they're out, they just dropped a major boss or completed an encounter, then they divide up there. They can string together and then divide only appropriately when one of the players might need to make a big purchase for spells or other various adventuring items overall. That group bank adds a lot of assistance to keeping things simple. Tip number 9. The XP leveling system versus a milestone leveling system. As the text is written originally, it is assuming you're using an XP system where you can tell the players about how much XP they've gained after any particular episode, and they can keep track of it, understanding when they reach a certain point, they'll level up to the next point. Uh, this has more or less fallen out of favor, while there's strong groups that leverage both the XP and the milestone system. In a long campaign setting, a milestone system might reduce the work that's required on the players to keep track of, reduce the work the DM has to make sure he communicates to the players in the midst of cleaning up an encounter, and just focusing on a milestone system overall where if you reach a milestone in the journey, like completing a certain number of encounters, or before you engage in a particular encounter, that they're at a certain level. If you would like to use to a milestone approach, these, as written on this page, are some suggested leveling from my perspective per encounter uh, that they have in the Lost Mines. It's a wide range of options. The major ones to focus on is the Ruins of Thunder Tree. You should expect that the level of the player characters are 3 to 4. For Red Brand Hideout, I recommend 2 to 3, preferably on the 3. Winer Tor 3 to 4 also, but before they enter Wave Echo Cave, I recommend that they're at level 5. The other ones are not as important. You're going to be starting out at level 1 from Gobble Ambush, so the ordering of those after that is not as notable or consequence. You just don't want to be facing off a party of first level player characters against the dragon at the Ruins of Thunder Tree. That's going to make a disappointing experience for the dungeon master and the players. Try to deliver the quest in such a manner to allow this natural progression, and making milestones means you're not going to have to add up or remember to say each XP line as written in the text. A lot simpler, very easy to do. Just do milestones and keep things moving. Lastly, tip number 2. Figure out what your players, your clients, the ones you're ultimately responsible for, what they like, and give them more of it. In most cases, it's going to be a balance between role-playing, combat, adventuring, puzzles, or traps. What they particularly like is going to fall some level in a pie chart between those different attributes. Some groups will prefer combat, some will prefer just talking and role playing, always trying to avoid combat with their skill and charisma. Others will just like the trying to figure out what's happening in the storyline, the puzzles and traps. Some key questions to think about as a dungeon master is, do they always want non-conflict ways out of their encounters? Or are they okay with sometimes the violence only being the answer to resolve certain encounters? If you get the impression that they're looking for non-violent ways at every opportunity, you may need to do a little additional work in planning those encounters to figure out if that's a way around it. Also, figure out how deep your players are willing to dive into the rules. If they're okay with you just making rule decisions on the fly, they're going to care more about the consistency of the application of those rules than the actual rule text themselves. If you find that they are delving deep into the rule book itself, make sure you stay one step ahead of them and avoid rules arguments best that you can. But typically, what I've found, unless they're really into it really early or more experienced, they're going to care more about consistency. Also, the pace of the game, including shopping sessions, interactions with vendors. Would they want to just make their exchanges, or do they prefer that longer RP dialogue? Is a key element that you'll want to figure out, because some players are just going to hate the times that you get into haggles with particular vendors over the price of things that will eventually be of little to no consequence overall. Figure out what your group likes in these types of encounters, and if you want to just make it simple, while it may break the immersion just a little bit, uh, give the players what they like. Lastly, what level of story elements are they really interested in? Is making sure they fully understand the plot, is that a major component, or they don't really mind and they're just looking for the encounter, quest, objective, completed, return type formula, or are they really, really motivated by their connection with the plot and adjust accordingly? Most of the times, better, more player engagement, pulling in those backstories to the stories will help drive them home and drive their quest to adventure. But if not, then don't overemphasize it. Don't push the lore if you don't think they're responding positively to it. It'll just get preachy and overwhelming. They may just like the grid combat more, and you just have to deal. And also, don't consume a lot of your time building backstories outside of game if the characters aren't receptive to it. If they're not interested in the long paragraphs you've written describing the environment, you email them before the games, don't do it. Just keep the description short and sweet within the game, and they'll have a better overall experience. So that's it. Those are my top 10 tips for starting out the Lost Mines of Phandelver overall. Hope you've enjoyed it, and let me know your comments or thoughts in the comment section of this video, and looking to creating more content like this to help new people starting in D&D.